Hey everyone, we've got a fantastic guest today, Bryan Chaney from the People Brand Collective. But Brian's been in charge of employer brand and culture from IBM to Twilio and to this infamous company you all know called Indeed. Brian's got to bring a lot of expertise in. My goal of having Brian on today has been to learn for mid-market, smaller companies, how can you do some of the things that these big enterprises do for your brand and your culture? Because I've worked for a couple companies that I think they just ring in my mind every time I think about something. It goes back to the culture we had, which has just been amazing. So welcome, Brian. Welcome to the show. And why don't you give us a little bit of insights about what you're up to today?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love all the conversations, and I think it boils down to what's the basic lesson? What's the problem? And how are you teaching somebody to think about solving that problem? So, whether it's somebody, and I laugh because I've been doing this work for over 20 years. And so, when you think about the companies that were making noise in the employer brand space, were the ones with the big budgets and the consumer brands and all that. And I would laugh and I'd be like, that's great, but you were drafting off of everything else that other people were doing and spending to get that result. So if you boil it down, what were the stories? What were the challenges? What were the things that made that experience feel human? So I love that aspect because I do think there's something to learn for everybody. That said, we've stood up People Brand Collective in March of this year. We're going full steam ahead. What is People Brand Collective? It's a professional organization for people who tell the stories about people experience within organizations. And so above the funnel, it's recruitment marketing. Within the funnel, it's employer brand. And then as employees, we think about how do we continue to stay in touch with the culture, the engagement, the drive, and what the business is trying to do. And that's internal comms and engagement. So think about all those pieces, and it's the people who tell those stories. So it's a professional organization. One has not existed before now, which is why we built it. And really, it's just to create a place for others to learn, understand what good looks like, and continue to develop their careers. But yeah, I love story and I love thinking about how that applies because it just makes people feel seen. And that's one of my favorite parts about employer brand and recruitment marketing work is understanding why people do what they do, what makes them tick, and what those motivations are. And I think that's the piece. I'm a people nerd at the end of the day.
Okay, so now here's the first question. So asking the same question you like to ask about people, what makes you tick? What makes you excited about when you're consulting a company, when you're working with people, and when you're bringing that story out, say the first set of interviews that you have with employees in a company? What's that kind of stuff that turns you on?
Oh man, so first I love people's stories. And I don't like the first story that I get from people because that's usually the one that they think you want to hear. And so I'll say, okay, can we get double click on that? Or let's peel that back. Tell me a little bit more detail. And I have something that lives on my laptop from time to time. And I even write it down. It says specifics create dynamics. And what that really means is the details matter and they help you understand how people can relate to it. So as I'm talking to an employee, as I'm talking to somebody on a team, okay, great. What brought you here? What's your favorite part of the job? What challenge did you have to overcome? Or what skill is not on your resume, but contributed to you being successful here? Like those kinds are really great conversation starters. You really have to get people talking about themselves outside of
Yep.
the job in order to let that armor drop a bit.
Yep.
And probably my favorite question is if working here had a soundtrack, what music, what songs would be on that soundtrack? And man, I'm telling you, I have heard everything from Beastie Boys to Ozzy Osbourne, Crazy Train. I have heard all kinds of different things. And some of it just depends on how that hits that person that day. But I
Yeah.
love it. And what I really love about it is I want to tell stories, but I want to empower people to share those feelings. So guess what we do when we have a list of all the songs that people say are on the soundtrack of working at that company? We make a playlist and
Yeah.
we share that playlist so people can go, oh, this is curious. This is how I feel. This is what I'm doing. And it was interesting to see at a company like Twilio, what kinds of music in the Bay Area back in 2015? When did that hit? What were the feelings and the vibe that came out of that versus something else like a company that was reinventing itself and in the energy field? What did that's where I got more of the Osborne Crazy Train.
That's great. No, that would be really cool to see even team by team what the dynamics are. Wow. Yeah, that is super cool. And I guess that's the fun part of the idea is it's not just about individuals in a structured conversation. It's about because they're not going to be authentic if they're like, here, we ask everyone these same 5 questions. It's
And you start, right? You have to start because people are funny creatures. They have to think they know what's going to happen. And you set that, I always call them starter questions. Here are
yeah,
the 5 starter questions. And we might jump around a little bit and I might peel something back. And they're like, but if they feel like they know what's going to happen, they're a lot calmer, a lot more comfortable and ready to open up a bit.
yeah, very cool. So between IBM, Twilio, and Indeed, I think it was that order, right? The 3 big ones. IBM first, then
IBM,
Twilio.
Twilio, Indeed, and then was Workrise and Crunchyroll, a Sony company. So I've seen stuff kind of all over the map.
Yep. And most of these guys are tech levels. What have you seen that can be transferred to say smaller businesses? If you're an HR business process consultant or someone in HR who doesn't really have the full bandwidth and team, say at a mid-market company, how can you have an impact and try to build out and get some layer of, I'd say, employer brand running with your team? And because from a recruiting side, it's just not there yet. And it would be helpful. What kind of suggestions for if you're just poking your toe in the water, if you will?
So I think it depends on what challenges you're trying to solve. If you're somebody in HR in mid-market and recruiting is one of the hats on your hat rack, and I think you take a bit of what you know as an HR practitioner and the guidance and what teams are trying to do and what are the values and what are the things that come up over and over again as mantras or mantras. I'm not sure however you
Yeah.
want to pronounce that, but the things that you hear over and over again when you think about an organization, you think about team dynamic and all that, and you have to apply it. You have to filter it through that. So I do think actually it's great that you have that exposure within HR, but then you have to map it over to, okay, now how do I talk about this experience? And I think you can do that today way more easily than you could have 5 years ago. And so obviously we're talking about AI, LLMs, answer engines, those kinds of things. But what they end up doing is they end up giving you something that makes you sound a whole lot like everybody else. So I think
Yeah.
to understand the tenets of a culture, if you're mid-market, if you've at least qualified, what are our values? How do we want people to show up? Great. That's content. That's sources of truth that you can feed an LLM and say, I want to create content for this. I want to update my job descriptions because most of the time, if you're mid-market, you don't have people just for funsies on a Wednesday going to your career site to see what's going on. They're mapping that to a hiring need, right? So
Yeah.
it's the job posting. Notice I didn't say job description, but it's the job posting that actually drives a lot of, okay, there's actually something that might be interesting to me. What do I need or want to know about it? And so I think
Yep.
that's probably the first one, in addition to the stuff that you put on your career site, if you can call it a career site, if it's not just, oh, here's our jobs in the ATS. And I think that's part of it is what's the story that shows up there? And man, it's about taking the stories of the people who are doing the job today. I always start by asking leaders, if you could clone somebody on your team, who would you clone and why? And they'd be like, oh, I'd hire 5 more of that person if I could. Great. Let me talk to that person. Let me figure out what kind of story, what brought them there. So be that inquisitive, be curious. So I think curiosity, having that never ending curiosity is super important. But taking that and turning it into content, wow, there's so many things. And I say that knowing that I've been a marketer for over 20 years. So for me, it might feel a lot more simple, but you can do that. You can iterate on that content so that your brand, the elements of your experience that you're selling, can show up in a meaningful way as you're talking to folks.
There's a couple of things in there you mentioned that are really helpful in the mid-market space. If you're a healthcare company with 1,000 employees hiring nurses and you have a different web page about nursing versus rad techs and doctor recruiting and whatnot,
Yeah.
those two things that Bryan mentioned, one was getting the stories about the nursing and the culture of the nursing. And then the other is figuring out ways to put that on that page. It's not part of the job posting page. It's the lead page to your job search on that area. And then the other part is the difference between the job description and the job posting. Two very different things that are often conflated because we take the job description and post it on Indeed when sometimes that's probably not appropriate. And many times it's probably not appropriate, but
But
up to your,
it's like putting a legal document in front of somebody as a sales sheet. You're not going to get the message. You might get lucky, but
yeah,
if the person doesn't already know why they should care and why they want to be a fit for that role or that organization, you're going to have a really hard time. And so that's why I look at a job description as an HR or legal document. It is,
yep,
okay, what are we going to be held accountable for that we said we wanted this person to do? That's essentially what that is. But it's
yep,
not what everybody needs to know when they're trying to figure out, is this a fit for me? Is this something that's compelling? Is this something I care about right now? And I do
yep,
think that you can have a job posting, because if you went to the hiring manager and you said, hey, these 17 bullet points, how many of these are absolutely critical for the person to be able to really be successful in this role? Oh, there might be 3 or 4 actually. Great. Let's focus on the 3 or 4. And let's
yep,
put that out in front, because we want people to self-select out of the process as much as we want
exactly.
somebody to self-select in. And I think as a mid-market player, you typically will look at volume and you look at exposure. Am I getting a number of applications? Is the hiring manager going to feel like they got enough to know that they got the best that the market will offer? And I think that's where you have to talk them through that and know that
Mm,
today the answer is not volume, quality, trusted, verified quality. And I think that's the difference in how a lot of people are used to hiring and versus what's available today, because you got the AI weaponization is
mhm.
going up on both sides, between the app that'll show up and talk me through an interview live or apply to jobs while I'm sleeping. And then on the other side, you've got the AI that will screen out because you've got 600 people applying to jobs. And now you need a way to get through to the right person. It's an arms race. And so like we're trying to figure out how to make that happen. And if you can minimize the exposure and focus on the things that are the most important, that's how you get the job done if you're wearing 6 different hats within HR.
Oh, that's perfect. Again, another golden gem that I want to pick people to remember here is what Bryan said about you want to get people to opt in and you want them to select themselves out. And that is from your job posting and that is your story about who you're trying to hire. Because some
And
people don't
and
want,
what success looks
yeah,
like. Because if
yeah,
you can't tell the story of what success looks like, it could be everything. Somebody could just want a job. But
yeah,
if you told someone that they probably won't be successful, even though it's a job that they look like they're qualified for on paper, if you said, hey, you could join here, but you're probably not going to be successful. And in 90 days, we're going to know that. How many people
yeah,
do you think would still go through that process?
yeah. And you can put that gate up early in the first interaction. And most companies like, oh, like falling asleep at the wheel about knowing when to say that or if it's okay to say that. I think
Well, and
maybe it's
that's the
a,
thing.
yeah,
Marketing usually doesn't, if you're a consumer brand, marketing
yeah,
usually doesn't like talking about anything that could be perceived as negative. And I went through this at an entertainment company where everybody's a paying client. Who's your client? Somebody with a credit card who can sign up for a subscription, right? And so they don't want to talk about things that can be perceived as negative, even when it's a truth. It is an undeniable truth of some of the work. And so if
yeah,
you own it and you say, yeah, this is a tough job, this is not for everybody. And I was able to get the brand team to a place where, because it's subtle and nuanced, you had to walk down that line. You can't just say we're not for everybody. You have to have
Yeah.
nuance and you have to explain it because they've got goals that they're trying to achieve as well. And I think that the other part when you're mid-market is you have to rely on your marketing and brand team to
Yeah.
supply some of those assets and storytelling things. And you want to make sure you're not upsetting their apple cart too much.
Yep. All right. And this leads us right into the next conversation, the expectation gap. Talk a little bit about that when it talks from an employer brand's perspective.
Oh gosh, we can go all the way back to the job ad or the job posting. You're setting expectations from day one, moment one. You're setting the expectation of what somebody can expect. You're
Mhm.
setting that with your interactions. You're setting that with the interview experience. You're setting that with the offer. You're setting that with definitely with the actual interviews, the hiring panel. What is this going to be? Everything is filtering from that. And if you, in my experience, your your enjoyment or lack thereof of any kind of process is driven by what you thought you were going to get. And so there's an expectation gap there between what we think we ought to say and the actual experience that we are able to deliver. And there can be a little bit of aspiration in there, but it can't be built on aspiration. The random number that I pull out of thin air is 20%, meaning you can be about 20% aspirational when you're talking about the experience that you're creating. If you've got a story about what are we doing to get there, if you don't have a story about what you're doing to get there, then you're selling vaporware at that point. And I
Mhm.
think that's
Yep.
the expectation gap is you might be selling one or repurposing one person's experience or one team's, but if that's not universal and that's not applicable for the role that you're hiring for, then you've created an expectation gap there. And that gap is going to fill itself or the person's going to fill it for you. And they're going to start telling themselves, oh, this is why this is happening. And they're not going to have all the right information in order to do that. So when you don't fill in the gap and tell that story, they're going to do it. And you don't want them to do it on their own because that goes one of two ways. Either it's, I'm not happy because you're not delivering on what you said, or it straight up is just them putting in their notice. It's like,
Yeah.
what has to change in order for this to meet my standards of passable for the expectations that you set? And I think that's the thing is being able to tell that story across the entire experience. And in recruiting, you're managing that gap. You're managing that gap all the time. And it's okay, can we sell that on this team? Not really, because this is how this team leader likes to operate and they operate a little bit different. Okay, so we've got to adjust that
Mhm.
message so that the people don't feel like they've been switched and baited in order to take this because you really want people as recruiters, we want people to be successful. We want people to be happy. We want them to feel like they got what they were promised.
Yep. I think that's really interesting too. And I haven't recruited outside of my own team in years. And I think what's interesting is the way I would suggest it almost seems like this is how you've done it and you train leaders to do it and recruiters themselves is you, they bring up, but I would say your students, if you would, bring up culture early in the conversation.
Well,
So it is, yeah, and it leads through that recruiting process. It's not, oh yeah, it's this other thing. Let me ask about it. It's all embedded in the process.
it is every touch point. Every
Yeah.
touch point is telling them what your culture actually is. And the question, the big gnarly question that people will ask is, what's your culture? That's relative. Oh, these are the things that are important to me right now. So that's what I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
When I'm coaching people on how to assess culture, I don't ask, tell me about your culture. What do you do when stuff breaks? What do you do when stuff doesn't go according to plan? That's your culture. How do you relate to
Mhm.
each other when things go wrong? That's your culture. How do you celebrate wins? What are the aspects that you celebrate? What gets repeated? What gets recognized? That's your culture. To me, we went through a process at the last company I worked at where people were like, oh, how do you define culture? And I'm like, you go to 10 different people and you ask them what culture means, and you're going to get at least 10 different answers. And so At a base level, we looked at it and we said, isn't it how you actually decide to show up for the people that you're working with? And I'm like, yes, that's it. Culture is how we show up for each other. And it's like how a manager shows up for somebody on their team, how the team member shows up for their fellow team member. All of those things, how are you showing up in the things that you're doing and how you prep? Are you 5 minutes early? Are you 4 minutes late? Are you talking about this? Are you sharing jokes in the channel? Are you asking people to share their perspective? Are you celebrating the things and are you trying to get ahead of the stuff before it breaks? To me, that's how you define culture.
Oh, that's great. All right. So I'll take a little side note because I want to ask you about your red phone on in your background and
Oh yeah.
how. So tell me the story about this. And for those that don't know, Twilio, a company that Bryan worked for, wait, what was it, 2015? Did you
Yep.
start there? And
15.
you, yep, in San Francisco. If you have ever sent a text message, you probably have used their service without knowing it because Twilio's in the US has been probably even globally the largest texting provider, I would gather on the globe at this point.
Yeah, they're plugged into, they've solved the problem of how to make SMS fungible for a lot of developers. If there's an app that sends a text, they probably use Twilio. And the story that we told all the time was, have you ever taken an Uber or a Lyft? They're like, yeah, you know that text that says that your driver's so many minutes away or whatever. Yeah, then you got a message from Twilio. And that helped people understand as we were telling that story, big builder culture. And it's grown a ton. I think the company was just under 300 back in 2015. It's grown so much since then, but still built on a builder culture. And so everybody was encouraged to create an app using Twilio. So it's Python based. And so there were learning sessions where you could go and learn about, okay, how do I write code on the Twilio platform? And so if you do that and you build an app, you get a track jacket and you present your app in front of the team at the time, the San Francisco office. And so that was a big deal. It's, okay, I'm going to do it, but if I'm going to do it, what's important? What do I want to be able to do? So one, you have to know that I'm a comic book nerd. And two, you have to know that when you talk about culture, you want those voices to come from the people. So we set up a Twitter handle and we had a culture hashtag. And so I was like, okay, whenever somebody uses the culture hashtag, I want to be able to recognize that and I want a notification. And I was like, what'd be cool is if we actually had a phone because Twilio is telecommunications. And so I went and sourced that actual phone, built it. We had it plugged in and got to the point where the app, whenever somebody would use the hashtag, the phone would ring and you knew that people were talking about their experience there. And so for me, like number one, that was my motivation. And then the fun part was just that it's the bat phone under the cloche. And I love comics. I was drawing comics, reading them. I love all the stories. And so that's a little piece of my nerd memorabilia.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I like the fact that it reinforces the culture. Like how many people could see a picture of Bryan now who worked with you in 2015, look back and go, yep, that's Bryan. That's his phone, right? That tells that it's an indelible story, right?
Yeah. It felt like kismet because it was like telecommunications, texting, nerddom, all that coming together. It was perfect. And I had just enough. I was able to piece together all the different things. I was like, oh, can I order that? Can I order that? Where can I find that? And I think I was either on, I think I might have even got it on like Facebook Marketplace or something at the time. And it was like way back. It was before I think Etsy really took off, or I would have just bought
Yeah.
it all on Etsy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I love that story and figuring out how people receive it, right? How they need to receive it to really feel it.
Yeah. All right. So let's ask one more question about scaling employer stories in a
Mhm.
company. What's your advice? What have you seen? What works? What doesn't? And what does good look like?
Good is when there's a story that resonates at a base level. It doesn't have to, you say you scale it, and scaling could be going from 0 to 8 or from 8 to 438. And I
Yeah.
think so scale is relative and good, I think, is relative. If we go back to mid market and we say, okay, how would I capture employee stories? you can do it a lot of different ways. I've done everything from capturing the influencers at an organization in a spreadsheet. So it's like we know who's talking about the company, we know who works there, we know who's talking about, we know their follower counts. Are they on Instagram? Are they on LinkedIn? So you curate that because one, I started in sourcing, so that's just how my mind works. But also, like you have a read on what are your employees naturally saying on their own. You find those influencers because those people will typically be influencers no matter where they go. They want to share, they want to talk. People are drawn to them for better or for worse. People want to pay attention. And so what you want to do is figure out, okay, what are they saying? And how can I capture some of that? So scaling that really just is recognizing the good behavior. And back when I was at Indeed, we had that list of who are the people who are already active, they're already talking, they already have followers, and then who starts talking about their experience working at Indeed. And so for us, we got really lucky in that company treats employees very well. And there was a decent amount of people who were already happy to be treated well. And so we started rewarding them. And what I mean by that is we created swag kits and messaging. And so without telling them we were going to do that, there's a shirt and some stickers and a couple of other things that we pulled together with a note from my team. Said, thanks for sharing our stories from inside Indeed, and sent that to them. Now, what happens if there's somebody who's already posting online and you send them a care package, thanking them for doing that? They're probably going to post about it. And so that was part of the thing. But then it became this, somebody got that. So it became this situation. So we started that way, a little more grassroots. And then people started doing it and going, am I going to get something? Is this behavior going to be rewarded in a way that I think it's going to be rewarded? And so you start that way, because I don't like the corporate command and control edict of you all must share these blog posts in the way that we're telling you to. That doesn't work for me. And a lot of people don't. It works for some companies and that's fine. But for me, I want people to show up and be creative and feel like who they are matters, and how they express that story is really important. So scale it has to be, do it in a small way, do it in a way where you know it's going to have an impact. And then you start capturing that story and sharing that story. And so as we were doing videos, there's tools now that allow you to do this in a much more automated and streamlined way. Oh, I want to send an email to these 8 people and I want to ask them to tell me one thing that they love about their job from this subset of things, right? You can do that. You can do that pretty inexpensively, and you can know exactly who saw the message, who recorded a video, or how did they write out. And then there's AI that's baked into the tool that will help guide them using your EVP pillars or your values and your promises, all those things that will help that sound maybe a little more aligned if you need it to. You need to have it tweaked in some form or fashion, but you have to do that in a way, and then you have to show it to other people. So the thing that I always did when people were fighting me on shooting a video, capturing a story, elevating a team or people within a function, because that's how you got people aware of what the company was trying to do. You just had to do one. You had to do one, you had to get it done. You had to make sure that that it looked good, that the person liked it, that maybe not they were crazy about how they sounded or how they looked, but they're like, that's accurate. There's nothing I would change about that. That's a good representation of my experience. Great. You do that and then you show it. They'll show it among their team. And then more often than not, I had other leaders within the organization go, hey, so I see so-and-so got a video. How do we get that on our team? What roles are you hiring for? And who are the people? So it literally just tells you, okay, you've got something that I want, because one, it's a form of recognition, but it's also in some cases, it's a box checking thing. Why do they have something that I don't?
Yep. All right. So let me ask you final question. What are you up to today? Where are you going to be so people can see you, hear you? I know you're on the speaker circuit, and how can people reach out?
Yeah. So what I'll say is we talk about this speaker circuit. I want to show up wherever there's going to be an audience who's interested to learn and talk and share something new with me too about story and how people are evangelizing this. So I do a fair amount of speaking and writing, But right now, I'm excited to go to London. I'm excited for two things. Wreckfest, which if you've ever heard of Wreckfest, it happened for over a decade in the London area in the UK. And I've actually never been to the UK one. I've been to the one in the US, been around for a few years, but I'm going to the original. I'm going to London, not just to be a co-host on the EVP stage, although that's pretty freaking amazing. I'm excited about that and all the people that
Yeah.
I'm going to meet, but I'm also producing a room the day before. So talking about employer brand, talking about, believe it or not, a debate between AI and the human advantage. So we're actually setting up a proper
Wow.
debate to say, okay, can AI do this? When you're thinking about telling the stories of employer brand and experience, where does AI sit? We got somebody on the AI side, we got somebody on the human advantage side, and spoiler alert, we'll probably end up somewhere in the middle. But understanding that, like, that kind of conversation gets me geeked, and finding all the people. Again, I said my career started in sourcing. So I love finding people who are like in the corners, who are doing the work and learning from them. Standing up PBC, People Brand Collective, has been amazing watching that grow. But I'm also launching my personal consultancy. I'm working with a couple of clients now, but I haven't launched formally. So I'll be launching that. And it's called, surprise, People Nerd. Some people are Star Wars nerds. Some people are Lego nerds or Harry Potter nerds or bicycle nerds. I'm a people nerd. I love talking to people. I love hearing what makes them tick. And that's also probably why I love playing poker, separate topic. But that's what I'm excited about right now. I'm excited for that trip. And I'm excited for the rest of the year with PBC and working with clients and just getting to meet some amazing people.
This has been fantastic, Bryan. Thanks for all your knowledge, all the stuff you actually do, because I'd like to thank you for all the employees that you've hired who got to the right company at the right time with the right brand, and they're still there or looking back and saying, that was a great time because I got what I wanted.
And that's the thing. Whenever I hear somebody who changes employers or jobs, I'm like, I hope the next step is exactly what you need. There's never going to be one solution, one end up at, maybe you'll stay at the same employer. Most people won't, but it's as long as that next step has the right progression and gives you what you need, man, that makes me happy.
Yep. Yep. It should make everyone listening happy to hear you can do it. And recruiters have a big impact on people's lives. And this is one way to confirm your legacy if you want to, is get them in the right place at the right time in the right seat.
And help them understand how they can be successful. And I think
Yeah.
that's the part it's more than getting the person hired.
Yep.
It's getting them successful and happy in a place where they can grow.
Yep. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. I'll put all your contact info. Have a great time at Wreckfest and go look for Bryan on the EVP stage.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you, Jonathan.
Thanks for spending your time here with GoHire Talks and listening to our guests. My intention has always been to create incredible content to help you in your career in recruiting and marketing, business and leadership. We appreciate all of the insights and feedback you provide. If you've got guests you'd like us to have on the show, please let us know. Again, thank you for all your support.